I met Celeste 5 winters ago at a ski cabin retreat in Breckenridge. A mutual friend had invited a mix of tech people, freelancers, and outdoorsy types for a long weekend of board games and badly cooked chili. I wasn't planning to go, but Trent talked me into it, said I needed to unplug and interact with humans for once. I brought my laptop anyway. Celeste arrived late Friday night, cheeks flushed from the wind curls, still damp with melted snow. She was the kind of woman who could step into a room and shift its gravity without saying a word. When we got paired off during a card game, she teased me for being too analytical and asked if I was one of those engineers who forgot how to speak full sentences. I liked that she didn't try to impress me. We stayed up talking until 3 a.m. Philosophy, AI, ethics, our favorite sci-fi novels, and how capitalism ruins creativity. She quoted Camus. I showed her my latest UI prototype. It was absurd and perfect. We started dating a month later, easing into something that felt both exciting and inevitable. She had her own tech background, UX designer at a Denver startup, and an intensity that matched my obsessiveness in quieter ways. Where I preferred to disappear into code, she thrived in brainstorming rooms and pitch decks. It made us a good balance, at least for a while. Somewhere around year 3, the rhythm between us settled into something familiar. We moved in together, split groceries and Spotify bills, but the spark that made those first nights feel electric started to dim. I chalked it up to growing up. Relationships change, they evolve. You don't live on adrenaline forever. Besides, I had other things to focus on, like the company. Trent and I had been building our startup since sophomore year of college. What started as a shared frustration over clunky messaging apps turned into long nights in my parents' basement with nothing but cheap ramen and a wall full of whiteboard sketches. He was always the smooth talker. I wrote code and kept us on track. He pitched investors and charmed our first clients. It worked. By our early 30s, we were closing in on a serious acquisition. A West Coast firm was interested. The kind of deal that could change our lives, low 7 figures, split 2 ways, stock options, non-compete clauses, the works. We were prepping for final meetings when Celeste brought up the engagement. She didn't pressure me. Not exactly. But one night over takeout, she said, "I'm not saying we need a wedding next month, but I do want something real, something official." She wanted a celebration that felt earned, a statement, something curated and unforgettable. I agreed. Why not 5 years together deserved more than casual promises and calendar reminders? And so we planned an engagement party at a vineyard outside, Boulder hand-picked guest list, custom invitations, catered dinner string lights, the whole thing. Trent even offered to help coordinate logistics, said he'd handle the DJ and the guest arrivals so I could focus on the emotional stuff. I appreciated it. At least I thought I did. The first time Celeste asked about the acquisition, we were sitting on the couch, half watching a documentary about tech monopolies. She paused the screen during a segment on intellectual property and turned to me, head tilted. "So, how does your ownership work if you and Trent built the app together?" I remember blinking at her, caught off guard. "We co-own the company, but there's a clause for anything developed outside of company hours." "Why?" She shrugged like it was just idle curiosity. "I mean, it's a big deal, right? You should make sure you're protected." I chalked it up to her being practical. Celeste had always been sharp with money, better than me at thinking long-term. But over the next few weeks, the questions kept coming about our valuation, who held the patent rights, how Megacorp calculated the payout structure. She even asked once if the deal would still go through if something shifted in the partnership. That word stuck with me, shifted. It felt out of place. At the same time, Trent started showing up more, not just for work, but for dinner, for wine tastings, for engagement planning. He offered to handle the playlist, insisted we let him curate the guest list. said he wanted it to feel like a joint celebration of love and success. I didn't push back. I figured he needed the distraction. His last relationship had ended badly, and he'd been restless ever since. Celeste didn't seem to mind. In fact, they got along unusually well. They'd laugh over shared memes, banter about food pairings, finish each other's jokes. I told myself it was a good thing, my two favorite people becoming friends. Still, one night I woke up at around 2 a.m. and found her sitting on the couch phone, glowing in her hand. She didn't notice me at first. I stood quietly watching the way she smiled faintly at the screen. Then she looked up. Her thumb hit the lock button so fast it was almost muscle memory. "Couldn't sleep," she said too quickly. "Just scrolling." "Who are you texting?" I asked. She waved it off. "Just my cousin. She's helping with the table layout." I nodded, not because I believed her, but because I didn't want to dig. There was a strange stillness between us for a few seconds before she got up and walked past me, murmuring something about needing water. Back in bed, I stared at the ceiling for a long time, listening to the distant hum of the fridge and the silence between us. Something was off, but I couldn't name it. Instead, I told myself I was just overthinking things, just stressed from work, just tired. And the next morning, when Trent showed up again, grinning, coffee in hand, another minor update for the guest list, I smiled back like nothing was wrong. The night before the engagement party, we had dinner at my place, just the four of us. Me, Celeste, Trent, and my sister Noelle. I'd asked her to fly in early to help with last-minute prep. She was the kind of person who thrived on details, and I figured her presence would help smooth any edges. Celeste cooked, a lemon risotto she'd practiced twice the week before. It turned out great, but she barely touched hers. Her laugh was a little too loud, her smile stretched just a little too long. She kept checking her phone, then setting it face down on the table. I noticed, but didn't say anything. Noelle noticed, too. At one point, while Celeste and Trent were in the kitchen grabbing wine, Noelle leaned in and whispered, "You feeling that weird energy, or is it just me?" I raised an eyebrow. "What energy?" she smirked. "They're either planning a surprise for you or practicing for a bad romantic comedy." I chuckled awkwardly and brushed it off. "They've been hanging out more since he started helping with the party. That's all." Noelle didn't press, but her eyes lingered on me a beat too long. Later that night, after everyone left, I walked Trent out to his car. He popped the trunk to grab a speaker he was bringing for the vineyard setup. Inside was a small black tote bag with gold lettering. I recognized Celeste's handwriting on the attached sticky note, "Essentials, don't forget." I stared at it for half a second too long. Trent noticed. "Oh, yeah. She asked me to drop that off early tomorrow morning at the venue." "Something for the bridesmaids' table, I think?" I nodded slowly. "Right. Makes sense." "Big day," he said, clapping my shoulder. "Try to get some sleep." I watched him drive off, headlights disappearing down the street. The night air was cool, but I felt strangely warm. Not the good kind, more like a flush that didn't quite fade. Back inside, Celeste was already in bed, eyes closed, face turned away. I lay beside her wide awake, listening to the low rhythm of her breath, trying to believe that everything was exactly as it should be. The next day would tell me otherwise. The vineyard shimmered under soft string lights, every table dressed in ivory linen and framed with copper place cards Celeste had personally designed. A hired quartet played something light and forgettable, while servers passed champagne flutes to clusters of mingling guests. From a distance it looked perfect, exactly the way she'd wanted it. I moved from table to table, thanking people for coming, dodging half-jokes about when the actual wedding would be. Noelle kept an eye on logistics, texting with the planner every 10 minutes, while I tried to stay calm, to stay present. It had been nearly 45 minutes since the time Celeste was supposed to arrive. No calls, no texts, just silence. I told myself maybe her dress had an issue, maybe her mom was holding her up, maybe traffic. I stood near the platform we'd set up for the short speech and toasts, one of the few things I'd been responsible for. Trent was supposed to be there with me hyping the moment passing the mic, but he was nowhere. Then, finally, he appeared. Not from the main entrance like everyone else had. He came through a side path from the back of the property, hair slightly tousled, shirt untucked under his blazer. He didn't look at me as he crossed the lawn. Just walked straight up, calm as ever. "Where the hell have you been?" I asked under my breath. He pulled me aside away from the crowd behind one of the tent posts near the catering setup. His face was unreadable. "She's not coming," he said. I blinked. "What are you talking about?" "She chose me." I thought I'd misheard. My stomach dropped before my brain caught up. He pulled out his phone, swiped through his gallery, and held it up to my face. It was a photo taken the night before. Celeste curled up against his chest in a hotel bed, half of her face buried in his neck. Her eyes were closed. She was smiling. "We didn't mean for it to happen like this," he said. "But it did. And she didn't want to lie anymore." My mouth went dry. I couldn't feel my hands. Behind me, I heard laughter silverware clinking, someone calling out for another glass of Pinot. In front of me, Trent was still standing there like he'd just given me directions to the restroom. I didn't speak. I turned back toward the tables, stepped onto the platform we'd set up together. Everyone went quiet. I scanned the crowd, our families, our co-workers, friends from college, distant aunts, old neighbors all looking up at me. "There's been a change of plans," I said. My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. "There won't be an engagement tonight, but the bar's open and the food's already paid for, so make the most of it." Then I stepped down, loosened my tie, and walked past them all, past the whispers, the pitying eyes, the confused glances, and kept walking until the lights and the noise faded behind me. I didn't go home. I didn't pack a bag. I drove. No music, no destination, just the dull hum of the tires on asphalt and the faint smell of champagne still clinging to my sleeves. My tux jacket was folded in the passenger seat, half soaked from where I'd spilled something and hadn't noticed. I pulled off the highway somewhere west of Nederland and found a cabin listed on Airbnb. Remote, quiet, Wi-Fi optional. I parked the car and shut off my phone. Inside, the place smelled like cedar and dust. A single-room queen bed, a kitchenette, and a fireplace I didn't bother lighting. I dropped onto the mattress, fully clothed, stared at the wood-paneled ceiling, and waited for the rage or the tears to come. Neither did. Just a strange hollowness, like something had been scooped out of me and left open. The next morning, I turned the phone on just long enough to see the notifications. Texts from Noelle, my mom, a few college friends. One from Celeste's mother that started with, "Please don't make a scene," and ended with, "You need to grow up." I didn't read the rest. Then I opened Instagram. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted proof that it had really happened. There it was. A photo of Celeste and Trent, standing on the balcony of a hotel suite, champagne in hand, sun hitting them just right. She was in a silk robe, his tie hanging loose around his neck. The caption read, "Free to love who I want. No regrets. New beginnings." The comments were full of affirmations, heart emojis, words like brave, empowered, and authentic. I shut the phone off again. It was the second night before anyone found me. Noelle showed up just after sunset. She knocked twice and let herself in holding 2 coffees and a backpack. "You're a hard man to track down," she said, setting the cups on the table. "But I figured you'd go somewhere no one could ask how you're feeling." I didn't say anything. She sat across from me, pulling out a pair of fleece socks. "I get it," she said. You lost someone you thought was your future." She paused. "But you didn't just lose her. You lost your partner, your best friend, your company's co-founder. And if you're not careful, you'll lose what you built too." I looked up at her finally. "You built more than a relationship, Gideon. Don't let them take that from you." And for the first time since the party, I felt something settle, not rage, not sadness, just weight, something I needed to carry forward. 2 days after Noelle left the cabin, I went home. The apartment was quiet. Half the kitchen drawers were empty. Celeste had taken her French press, the Japanese knives, and the linen napkins she insisted we needed but never used. She'd also taken the PlayStation and the smart TV. A note on the counter said, "I hope someday you'll understand." I deserved to be happy. There was no signature. I stood there for a long time, the note in one hand, my phone in the other. Then I went to the closet, pulled out my old laptop, and opened the files I hadn't touched in weeks. For the past year and a half, I'd been working on a security algorithm. Not part of our main app, not something Trent even knew about. I built it during nights when sleep didn't come easy after code freezes on weekends, when Celeste was out catching up with friends, and during long flights to investor meetings while Trent made small talk with executives. It was sleek, lightweight, fast, and more importantly, it solved the one flaw no one else in the market had cracked. Megacorp's legal team had flagged it as the biggest value driver in our acquisition talks. And it was mine. I'd kept meticulous records, timestamps on every commit, change logs saved to my personal cloud. I'd even hired a patent attorney, Thomas Valen, to handle the filings separately. Trent never questioned the clause in our partnership agreement that said anything developed on personal time with personal equipment was the property of the individual. In fact, he was the one who insisted on it back when he wanted to freelance on the side. That clause was about to pay off. I emailed Thomas. Subject line, "Final draft and certification needed." Within the hour, he replied. Everything was ready. Filing complete. Full IP ownership, clean chain of documentation. Ironclad. The algorithm wasn't just a project anymore. It was leverage. I closed the laptop, leaned back in the chair, and for the first time since the vineyard, I didn't feel like someone who'd been left behind. I felt like someone who'd been underestimated. And that's when I picked up my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and dialed Megacorp's acquisitions lead. The call with Megacorp lasted 47 minutes. Sarah Kim, their acquisitions lead, didn't interrupt much, just asked a few pointed questions, the kind that told me she already suspected something was off. I laid out the essentials, the independent development of the algorithm, the clause in our agreement, the patent filings, the timestamps. I didn't mention Trent or Celeste by name, not yet. Just said there were partnership complications that could affect the original equity split. At the end, she said, "Send me everything." I sent it that night. Code commits email chains, screenshots. Even one of Celeste's texts to Trent saved from a backup. Once the money hits, we can finally be honest. They had underestimated me in every way. By morning, Sarah had already looped in their legal counsel. We arranged a private meeting for the following week. It wouldn't be public. Not yet. They agreed the deal should proceed, but the terms would need to reflect the actual ownership value. 85% to me, 15% to Trent, pending verification. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clear. This wasn't revenge. It was correction. That week I barely slept. Not from stress, but from focus. I organized every receipt, every line of documentation. I made a private index of interactions between Trent and Celeste, dating back 6 months. Nothing sensational, just patterns, context, proof of timing. The betrayal didn't just hurt, it had a structure, and I was going to dismantle it in full view, calmly, legally. When the day came, I dressed in a suit Trent had never seen. Not for him, for me. I walked into Megacorp's headquarters, nodded to the receptionist, and took the elevator to the 12th floor, where the real meeting was already waiting. Trent arrived 10 minutes late, grinning like he'd already spent the money. He nodded at me like nothing had happened, then paused when he saw the room, Sarah, 2 lawyers, an empty chair across from me. "What's this?" he asked, still trying to laugh it off. I didn't answer. My lawyer slid a folder across the table. Inside were the patent papers, timestamps, development logs, and a printed copy of our partnership clause highlighted. Sarah spoke next. Calm, efficient. The proprietary algorithm central to this acquisition belongs solely to Mr. Holt. Based on our valuation, we've restructured the payout. She handed him the new contract. Trent read it. His smile slipped. "You're joking." 85 to me, I said quietly. 15 to you, based on your contribution to the original platform only. He looked at me like I'd pulled the ground out from under him. Celeste said I stood. Celeste said a lot of things. I didn't wait for his response. I left the folder open on the table, the terms staring up at him, and walked out without another word. Outside, I stepped into the hallway, took a breath, and saw her waiting by the elevator. She was waiting in the lobby, dressed like she thought we'd be celebrating something. When she saw my face, her expression faltered. I walked past her without slowing down. A week later, word got around that the condo they'd placed a down payment on had fallen through. Financing collapsed after Trent's reduced payout. A mutual friend said they were arguing in public restaurant lobbies, building hallways, even a hotel bar, loud enough for people to take out their phones. Then I got the text. "From Celeste, I think there's been a huge misunderstanding. Can we talk?" "I've been doing a lot of thinking." I didn't reply. I forwarded it to Trent. 10 minutes later, another friend messaged me a screenshot. Trent had posted a black square with a caption that read, "Some people burn everything they touch and still think they're the victim." The comments exploded. So did their relationship. She moved out the next day. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel anything, really. Whatever they thought they'd gained, they were back to zero, except now they'd have to live with each other's truth. I turned off my phone again, packed a bag, and drove up to the lake house. The lake house sits just outside Boulder, tucked between tall pines and still water. I bought it a month after the deal closed. Quiet mornings, long stretches of time without interruption. It was everything I didn't know I needed. I started mentoring a group of junior developers on weekends. Just a few students at first, then more. They'd come by for coffee code reviews and advice on how to build something that actually matters. It reminded me why I started in the first place. Somewhere along the way, I met Elena. She runs a local bike shop, has her own business, her own rhythm. She doesn't ask about money or the past. We talk about trail conditions, good books, the parts of life that aren't transactional. It's simple, it's honest. I still think about what happened, but not the way I used to. Not with heat, just with clarity. They didn't betray me because I was weak. They did it because they thought I wouldn't fight back, that I'd fold, vanish, stay broken. But I didn't. They tried to break me so they could own my future. But I was always the one writing the code, and I've already moved on to the next version.